I really, 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 really want to be Kodesh, Kodesh. I really, 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 really want to be Kodesh.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rock for a Pillow. My name's Kenny, and today's episode I'll be telling you all my testimony. I hope that this helps you in your walk of faith, and if you aren't a person of faith, I hope that this gives you some food for thought, because my testimony is a story of how I went from being an atheist to believing in the God of Israel, the God of the Bible, as the creator of the universe, of the world that we live in. So I'd like to start my testimony by just telling you all what I believe, and then I'll tell you how I got there. So I believe that the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Christianity in the Bible, created the heavens and the earth. His name, you might know him as Jehovah or Yahweh or Yahuwah. But those four Hebrew letters, Yod, He, Vav, He, that's the God that I believe in and that I serve. And I believe that Yahushua, or Jesus of Nazareth of Galilee, is his son and prophesied Messiah, in that he came and was crucified and died and rose from the grave in triumph over death to be the sacrifice for the sins of mankind. More specifically, I do believe what differentiates me from typical Christian, mainstream Christianity is I believe that the Messiah didn't come to do away with the laws of Moses, specifically like the Sabbath day and like the feast days and the food laws. And really that's the only thing that differentiates me from regular Christian as far as day-to-day life goes. And even beliefs, it's not a matter of keeping the law for salvation, because any Christian will tell you that you shouldn't steal, or you shouldn't lie. And I just believe that you shouldn't work on the Sabbath day just as much as you shouldn't steal or lie. It's not really a like saved and not saved thing. Messiah is the door, the only way to salvation. So my story begins, as a little kid. I was raised in a Presbyterian church by my parents. I had strong faith as a kid, little kid faith. I had like a nuclear family, like the typical, quintessential nuclear family: mom, dad, brother and sister, all going to church, and I loved it as a kid, and I loved God for it, for giving it to me. And a story that I like to tell to kind of illustrate that, when I was like around 5 years old, not sure exactly how old, I was outside in the front yard with my little sister. We were playing in the yard, and the neighbors were supposed to be watching her and I, and for some reason there was a lapse in the watch, and we were out there alone. And so she's got this new pair of boots, and of course, parents bought them one size big so she could grow into them, because she was like 2 or 3 years old at the time. And so she's kicking the boot off because it's easy for her. She kicks it off across the yard and then goes and gets it and puts it back on and kicks it. And she's just kicking the boot around. I forget what I was even doing. I think at that point I kind of realized that the neighbors weren't watching anymore. And so I was kind of watching her. And one of the times that she kicked her boot, she kicked it into the middle of the street. And as a 5-year-old, I don't know much about the street, except for that my parents told me never to go in the street because it's the most dangerous place ever and you're going to die if you go in the street. So I thought that if my sister went in the street to go get that boot without an adult around, that it was like certain death. So I start panicking. I see her running over to get the boot, and I run her down and like grab her up and gripped her up by her coat. And I start looking around for the neighbors, and they're nowhere to be found. And I'm yelling for help, and nobody's helping. And she starts having a temper tantrum that I won't let her go get her brand new boot that she likes so much. And so she starts to like squirm out of her coat. I got her by her coat, and she's like squirming out of it. And there's cars going by, and I'm panicking, don't know what to do. And so I started praying to God, like, please help me get out, help me get out of this scenario, save my sister. And as soon as I said amen, my dad comes out the front door and diffuses the whole situation. And I was so grateful for it that when I told the story to Sunday school class the next week, I couldn't even finish the story without crying, coming to tears as a little kid. And of course, the adults all thought it was the cutest thing ever. So, I mean, that's how I like to illustrate me as a little kid. And so as time goes on, nothing really changes much. And then one day at the dinner table, my parents broke the news to the family that they would be separating. And this took everybody by surprise because they were very good at hiding their arguments from us as kids. And so, we didn't really know what was coming in it, so it hit us all, blindsided us, my siblings and I. So I took it really hard at that age. I think I was 12 or 13. I'm not exactly sure how old I was. But around that time is when I start to, find out more things about the evils in the world. Up until that point, I guess I kind of lived in a bubble where it was just like me and my perfect family, and I felt safe. And then when that happened, it was like all safety was gone. And so, and like I said, around the same time as I'm becoming a teenager, I'm learning about like famines in third world countries and wars and all the rest of the evil in the world. And I'm thinking to myself, where is this God that I learned about in Sunday school that is supposed to be all loving and all knowing, all powerful, that kept me up until this point perfectly? How could he let something like this happen? And what about the people in the third world countries that are starving? Where is he? And so I, at that point reasoned, similar to a lot of philosophers that I came to learn as I got older, that if God is all powerful, he has the power to stop this evil, and if he's all knowing, he knows how to do it, and if he's all loving, then he has the desire to. So it can't possibly be that he's all three of those things and there's still evil in the world, because if he was, he would stop the evil. And I've come, now I realize the error in my logic, and the only way that a world like that can exist is if humans don't have free will to choose between good and evil. So the only way for God to give us the ability to choose our path is for him to allow evil into the world. And he wasn't the cause of the evil. It was humans who were the cause. And he was there to see me through it the whole time. And that's what I didn't realize. But, cut back to around then, 13, 14 years old, I'm all angsty and, just mad at God. And I thought for sure that I just denounced him entirely and said that he can't exist and there is no God. And I became further entrenched in my views as I got older, to the point where I was like that atheist person who looked down on Christians. I'd make fun of them, say like, I think, how could you be so stupid to believe such fairy tales and things like that. And like I was always reevaluating and rationalizing my beliefs, like double checking them, like, could there be a God? Like, I got to make sure that I'm right about this type of thing. So, that's always in the back of my head. So that's something to keep in mind as I tell the rest of my story. So around a couple years later, against the advice of probably every adult in my life up until that point, I gave in to the peer pressure to have my first beer. I caved in. And the thing about that beer is that after I had a couple of them, I felt happier than I've felt since my parents broke the news to my family at that kitchen table. It was like I went back in time and regained the happiness that I had beforehand when I was drinking. And so at a young age, you can imagine that I took to drinking and partying, pretty quickly, and I just began trying to go out every possible opportunity I could get. If I could, any weekend, I say I'm going over to my friend's house, we're having a sleepover, and we're going skateboarding or something, and I was gonna go out and party. And so I didn't feel. Well, I want to include that I didn't really feel remorse over it and I fully believe that it's because I was an atheist that I didn't really have any qualms with doing it. As I got older and more developed in my worldview, we can cut that out. We can cut that out in the post-production. So, anyways, as I got older in my worldview, and more developed in my worldview, I realized that if there was no God, then that means that there was no objective right and wrong. And I know that not every atheist agrees with that, but I think that it's really the only logical conclusion. And I know there are a lot of atheists that do agree with that. And so, in my mind, coming to terms with that, I was thinking, if I'm doing these things, the only possible consequences is what's going to happen to me in this lifetime. After I die, it's going to be just like before I was born, and I'm not going to know the difference. And there's no God to say it's right or wrong. It's only people, and people's minds change all the time. And so that's not really a solid, absolute benchmark of right and wrong. So I was just going off my feelings, what I thought and felt was right or wrong, and what I could get away with, really. If I could get away with going out and partying and doing whatever I wanted, I was going to try to get away with it because I didn't fear, any consequences except for, the consequences that man could put on me. And if I could avoid capture, then I was going to, give it a shot. So I got to backtrack a second and say that I was a gifted kid academically, and this definitely took a toll on my performance in school. And that's something that I won't say I still regret it to this day, but in the past I had major regrets over that. And so I say that to say that's one of the consequences that started to manifest itself in my life for these actions that I was taking. So as I got older, I got, more and more or counterculture, I should say, more and more like anti-establishment. I didn't want to go to college. I moved to Arizona like right out of high school, and thought that I was gonna make like a career skateboarding, and I might have had a career like as like what's it called, like the league under the NHL, farm league or something like that. That would be like my equivalent of talent in skateboarding, if I was to treat my body well and not abuse it with alcohol. I might have maybe made some of that, but living like I had no chance. And so after living a few months on my own, out on the West Coast, I quickly realized that I was going to need like a regular job. I was really poor out there. I was resorting to like donating plasma to pay rent. And as soon as that lease was up, I was coming home with my tail in between my legs, like, send me to college. I need a real job. I'm not doing this. And that was one of the first turning points that started to shift my worldview and made me kind of doubt these convictions that I held so strongly up until that point. So because, if I was wrong about the whole anti-establishment thing and being able to do, like whatever I wanted and make a living at it, maybe I could have been wrong about other things. So I come home, start going to school. I start dating a girl. We date for like a year and a half. And I'm still, living kind of like the party lifestyle, drinking all the time. And that was one of the main contributors, I think, that killed that whole relationship. And so after that ended, I went on a pretty heavy bender that ended in the spring. And that summer, I went on like a huge bender the whole summer. Should I say, explain to folks at home what a bender is? I think everybody knows.
Yeah, please help us understand. What is a bender, Kenny?
A bender is like a long-term binge, like over the course of months or years, where you binge for an extended period of time. So that point was really rock bottom for me, and I found myself miserable in my life. And I like to use the expression, I traced the cord back to the wall. I was tracing the cord back to the wall, trying to figure out what was wrong. How come I don't have any connection? Why am I so miserable? And I did a lot of searching. I kind of had to humble myself and realize, I've never even read the Bible. How can I be so sure that what it's saying isn't true, just by my own logical assumptions? I got up until that point, I was like, well, God doesn't exist, so nothing in the Bible can be true, or it has to be at least flawed because it's written by man. But I never read it for myself to find a flaw in it. So that was always in the back of my head, and I didn't really act on that up until my major turning point. But I'm searching, I'm beginning to doubt my atheist worldview is what I'm trying to say here. So, because I'm so miserable, I'm kind of looking for any way out. So I'm going to see a therapist, and this therapist, he's he's not even really a counselor. He's just trying to convert me to Buddhism. He's telling me to meditate, and it wasn't secular meditation. It was full on Buddhism. He was trying to give me that was his answer to my problems. And I was kind of PO'd about that, to be honest, because I remember thinking this is not the God of my fathers, and this is a bunch of malarkey. This guy, and I'm paying you who knows how much money for this. But I was experimenting with Eastern religions at doing yoga and meditation and stuff like that, and I found it to be lacking. And I can't say exactly why. It was more of just a gut feeling. So as I'm searching, the conclusion that I came to was that the reason I was having all this problem in my life was because that I had broken all of the commandments, well, not all of them, but most of the commandments that I had learned in Sunday school. And I could see clear connections between me breaking the commandments and all the grief that I had in life. For example, the relationship with my girlfriend. If I would have, followed the stuff that I learned in church about how to go about finding a wife, I wouldn't have ran into that whole problem that caused me a ton of grief. And as most people probably have experienced something like that, that's the chief cause of grief in a lot of people's lives. So that was a big one. The drinking is another, clear one that I probably would have stayed away from that if I had been following the teachings of my church. And so this realization really humbled me, and it was to the point where I couldn't go on denying the existence of that God of the Bible any longer. And so what I did is I prayed. I said a prayer of repentance, and it went something like, God, if you'll forgive me for all of this stuff that I've done wrong, that I should have known, that you tried to teach me as a kid. then I will serve you for the rest of my life. And I don't know much about you, but I just have to have faith that your son died for my sins and I can be forgiven by his sacrifice. And so if you'll forgive me by his sacrifice, then I'll serve you for the rest of my life. And so at that point that I prayed that prayer, I no longer had the desire to drink anymore. And this is huge. I didn't have to go to AA. I didn't have to go to, I wasn't seeing that therapist anymore because he wanted to put me on drugs and I didn't want any part of that. I didn't need to go to any support group. It was just me in prayer and the Bible. I started reading the Word right after I made that prayer of dedication. And if I ever started to get depressed or upset or like have any kind of craving, I guess you could say, I would start reading the Bible and it would just go away miraculously. So that's the crux of my testimony. If you take anything away from it, is that God does have the power to deliver you from things like that, because he delivered me, and it was by no help of man or anything else. It was him alone. Today it's, I'll be 5 years sober in March 24th was my last beer. So I'm starting to read the Word, right? I'm newly sober. I'm newly, Christian. I start going to church that my mom's going to. She's going to this non-denominational church. I'm going to church again. I'm getting my life back on track, right? So I'm reading the Bible, quite zealously. And I had this scripture repeating in my head, take heed that you be not deceived. I don't know where I read it, because that was in the New Testament, and I started reading in Genesis because I wanted to read cover to cover so I knew everything. And that saying of the Messiah just kept on cycling in my head. Take heed that you be not deceived. Make sure that you're not deceived, because people are out there to deceive you. And so I'm reading the Bible with this going through my head, and I was like, I got to make sure that I know everything so that I'm not deceived, right? So I say that to say I was paying close attention when I was reading. And when I get to Exodus, where the 10 Commandments are listed, the Sabbath day jumped out at me immediately. I was like, what in the world? Why aren't we still doing this? I remember them teaching it to me in Sunday school and teaching it to me like it was really important. These are the 10 Commandments. These are the most important commandments from God. If you don't do anything else, you got to keep these. The golden rule is from the 10 Commandments. So that really threw me for a loop, and I'm searching for why we don't do this anymore. Like, it must be in the New Testament somewhere that Jesus says that we don't have to do it anymore, and that wasn't the case. So I found out that there's a lot of debate on the topic, and it wasn't, a clear-cut thing. And so that was the first thing that led me to the slightly unorthodox doctrines that I hold today, that I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast. So, that opened up the rabbit hole for me to realize that there's a lot of things that the church wasn't, telling the truth about. And I came to find out as I finished reading the whole Bible that the reason they're not telling the truth is because it's for money, really. The truth is hard to accept. It's not like fun or anything. Like, there is joy and hope and peace in accepting the Messiah, but there's also a death. Your old self has to die, and people don't like that. They don't like to give up the conveniences that you might have to give up. You have to make a sacrifice, and people don't want to do it, and that's going to cut into the church's bottom line. If they start preaching truth, people are gonna leave, and they won't make as much money. And if they dilute the truth and make it something that everybody can easily accept, and just twist it to make it congruent with a worldly lifestyle, I guess you could say, then that'll bring in more tithe payers. And this is, Paul prophesies about this numerous times in his letters. And, he makes it really clear that this is what's going to happen. That's what you have to look out for. So, I guess I would say that I was just blessed with this realization and understanding so that I could be on my toes about it, because that's what the word says, to be on your toes. Paul goes to great lengths to tell us, hey, be on your toes, because they're out there to get you. So, let's see here. So, when I realized the thing about the Sabbath, I couldn't really go to my mom's church on Sundays anymore, because I just kept on feeling like, hey, we're here on the wrong day. Like, I was looking back and forth. Doesn't all of you realize that that we're here on the wrong day? And so I stopped going to that church just based off of that. And last week, it couldn't have even been a whole 7 days ago, I found out that the pastor had a child out of wedlock and married the woman when she was 4 months pregnant. And the baby's going to come in December. And they were married in June, late June. And you shall know them by their fruits. That was the fruit result of the thing that I knew in my, I spiritually discerned in my spirit, and left that place. That was 4 years ago. And that's what is coming all around the horn. And you can count on that happening. You can always count on that. If you take the Bible literally as the Word of God, take it at face value, and have faith in it, you can know what's going to happen, and be sure of it. It's really remarkable, how much faith, how much you can really lean on that. Even though it seems like it might be, like he seemed like a nice guy. It seemed like a great church. You could so easily be deceived into thinking that he was like a holy man of God who's doing all these great kindnesses to the community and everything. But meanwhile, he's committing these acts of hypocrisy and doing stuff that the Bible, that he would probably even preach that you shouldn't do, So I stopped going there, and I started going to Seventh-day Adventist church. And this is around the same time I'm like halfway through reading the Bible at this point. And so I'm still have that in my head, take heed that you be not deceived. And so I'm doing all my research on the Seventh-day Adventist church, and I find out that their founder and prophetess, Ellen White, had a few unfulfilled prophecies, and by the requirements of Deuteronomy, that would make her a false prophet. And so I stopped going there. And so the following months after that, I just kind of stayed to myself and finished reading the Bible. But I knew that I would need to continue fellowshipping, because that was something that the Bible said that I should do. So, and I knew I needed to get baptized as well. So I prayed that God would send me to a congregation that preached the truth. And I really didn't think that they were even out there, because I was looking and I was like, there's nowhere that even keeps the Sabbath day besides Seventh-day Adventists. Like, where am I going to go that actually teaches sound doctrine? And I found on the internet this denomination, I guess you could say, of Messianics or Messianic Jewish. But it wasn't Jewish people who became Messianic. It was like Christian people that started keeping the Torah. So Messianic Jewish is kind of a misnomer. But so I went there. I was like, this is the only place. I just got to like start going to somewhere that keeps the Sabbath. And this was the only place I could find that kept the Sabbath. And lo and behold, when I go there, the pastor there was preaching sound doctrine. And I've been going there, I think, at least 3 years now. And there hasn't been something that came out of the teaching that I've disagreed with in 3 years, which is, I never in a million years would have thought that was going to happen before I started going there. I thought there was going to be I thought I was going to find any church. So I do believe that God really answered my prayer, because that was the first place that I went to after I made that prayer. And I've been there ever since. So I will say that Yah is faithful. Yahweh, Yahuwah, Jehovah, He is faithful. He has kept all of His promises to me that He made in His Word. And I hope you all enjoyed my testimony today. If you'd like to talk to me, you can email me at kennethmwalsh@yahoo.com. Atheist folks, if you want to get in touch with me, I love to talk about philosophy and I don't want to say debate, but discuss the existence of God, the existence or non-existence. I would love to talk to you because I probably held all the beliefs that you hold at one point in my life. And believers, I hope that this encourages you. And I just want to tell you all, until next time, to stay prayed up.
Prayed up! Yes, yes.